Hi, my name's Tyler Ting. I'm a regulatory affairs professional, and I'm the director of regulatory at Rook Quality Systems. So I graduated back in 2015 with 2 degrees. I studied biochemistry and mechanical engineering, so it was a pretty natural segue to get started in medical devices. I started as a junior project manager, and then there was an opportunity to join regulatory affairs. In my time as a project manager, I saw that regulatory affairs and quality affairs really dictate the development of medical devices quite a bit. So I knew it was going to be an important way to make an impact in medical devices. I started at the company doing software as a medical device at a blood banking and cellular technologies company, and got my teeth cut doing software as a medical device, getting a clearance for a 510K. I then went to the largest medical device manufacturer in the world and did international registrations around the world. I did that for a year, and then I went back to the FDA and did some post-market stuff at a sports medicine implantables. Then COVID hit. After COVID, I went to a COVID-19 antigen IVD manufacturer, submitting an emergency use authorization and really interacting with the FDA quite a bit as they had an all hands on deck situation fighting the pandemic. Unfortunately, that COVID-19 test didn't have great performance as the pandemic went on, but I used that small business experience to go into consulting, where I worked with numerous startups and facilitated just so many interactions with the agency on behalf of lots of novel medical technologies. And obviously that leads me to where I'm at right now, which is with Rook, which is kind of a more mature startup that's able to, or a consulting business that's able to work with both startups and mid-sized and large organizations. So what drew me to Rook Quality Systems was actually that I had worked with a Rook Quality Systems employee at my prior consulting firm. We worked really closely together. We got really close. We're buddies still. And there was an opening to join as a regulatory affairs leader. And I thought it was a perfect opportunity. And especially when I spoke with Kyle Rose, the CEO, I was really impressed with his direction, his vision, his leadership, and the current state of the organization. Rook Quality Systems is really unique in that it's done quite a bit, obviously, in establishing quality management systems with a wide variety of manufacturers, from startups to mid-sized to large organizations. So I know that I'll be able to get a lot of experience and shape the direction of the regulatory affairs department as I continue my time here. My very first job, I grew up in a very small town, and I'm the child of immigrants. My parents ran a Chinese restaurant, and I worked in that Chinese restaurant all the way through my childhood until I finally went off to college. So I was a busboy, a waiter, a delivery driver, and that job obviously sticks with me till today because I worked it for decades. The most important takeaways I got from that job, however, that I apply to my work at Rook Quality Systems every day, is the importance of excellent customer service. The interactions that you have with your customers, from first impressions to maintaining relationships, are vital to ensure that customers feel heard, that there's good lines of communication, that you tailor your communication to each unique individual, because everyone's a little bit different. And ultimately remembering what the value that the customer walks in the door for. At my parents' restaurant, it was for excellent Chinese food, and for Rook Quality Systems, it's to get us to market together as efficiently and as effectively as possible. Pivotal moment in my career history that really changed the direction I was heading for my career was the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic. I had worked mainly in large organizations, kind of just getting a new product development that was a little bit larger and more directed going. And after the COVID-19 pandemic started, I went to go work for smaller organizations because they'd moved much more nimbly. And obviously, the first organization that I went to work for was a COVID-19 diagnostic manufacturer who was trying to get an antigen test to hit the huge requirement of testing so that we could end the pandemic. Ever since then, I've really only worked at small organizations because I see the benefit of moving extremely nimbly to get innovative medical devices to market. As the Director of Regulatory at RQS, I've got a lot of big priorities coming up. The history of RQS is quite impressive. We have a number of professionals who have extreme versatility in what they've been able to accomplish. They're able to implement quality management systems and also guide our clients through the regulatory process at the same time. I would like to bring a certain level of depth to the expertise in the regulatory affairs front, and especially in confronting the risks of as we prepare for submission. There's a natural uncertainty that goes into the pathway as you interact with regulatory agencies. And I think with my expertise, I can bring in a lot of risk mitigations and more important strategic decisions early on that will allow us to be successful as we navigate those interactions with the regulatory bodies like the FDA. Advice that I'd give to new medical device manufacturers who are preparing for their first regulatory submissions, such as with the FDA, is that if the first time you're working with FDA, you probably heard some horror stories about them being the big barrier to get over. However, I think it's really important to shift the paradigm of how you view regulatory agencies, and especially once you've interacted with them, to see that they are usually a group of pretty brilliant engineers and scientists themselves, and they just have an important mandate to safeguard the public health through the body of regulations that have come before them and that they have to implement. But ultimately, they do want to partner with novel medical device manufacturers to bring the latest and greatest in technologies to the public health domain so that they can improve patient impact. I think with that paradigm shift, it brings the best approach in partnering with those regulatory agencies to address the burdens that ensure that these novel medical technologies are safe, but also expediently get the most innovative technologies to the market. Main area of expertise in regulatory affairs and compliance is really in regulatory strategy, and especially early stage startups. I'm able to take a look at novel medical technologies and assess whether they're devices, and then find what kind of classifications and thus regulations are pertinent for those technologies to get to market. I have worked in a number of other areas, including the EU MDR and getting the CE mark. I've worked in international, so I've gotten registrations in conjunction with lots of regional specialists. And I've also worked in post-market compliance with devices that are already on the market and the complaints and recalls that follow. But again, the majority of my career has been in making sure that the testing strategy, the development decisions that go into developing new technologies are ready for submission when submission time comes. I think along with a lot of other people, I'm very excited to see what the explosion of artificial intelligence will mean for the medical device industry. I think that FDA understands the importance of putting out expedient guidance that's digestible for industry. And I think the advent of new technologies and seeing what kind of patient impacts they'll have is going to be quite incredible to witness. Even just in the short time where AI has come onto the market, we've seen FDA put out some specific guidances like the development of the Predetermined Change Control Plan, the PCCP, and at Rook Quality Systems, it's been awesome to be able to be part of some PCCP submissions already and see them go through agency review. The way that I keep my knowledge and skills sharp in an industry that changes as fast as medical device regulatory compliance is that I must stay abreast of the latest regulations as they come out. They come out relatively often, so there's just a certain amount of discipline required to set aside time to read and digest. So sometimes I am reading these things in the middle of the night or on the weekends. And I think even more important than setting aside time to digest and comprehend these new guidances and edicts from agencies like the FDA, it's really important to speak to people within the industry and stay abreast with the latest dialogue, because that will give you the most recent interactions with the agencies and industry approaches to make sure that innovative approaches and strategies can be used to address the requirements that are set out in the guidances. So the way I see the role of regulations evolving as these new technologies come to market, such as AI, digital health, and combination products, is that I see the regulatory burden, unfortunately, being quite high. And a lot of folks don't know that, unfortunately, the regulations are kind of carving out what types of technologies consumers have access to. And there is a certain wait and see approach that's going to happen with these technologies as FDA kind of settles into the most consensus approach to how they're going to regulate these technologies. As the dust settles, though, we will understand what the burden will be on these technologies, and that consensus will get spread across industry. And as the path gets worn and trod and walked down multiple times, I think that there will be efficiencies in being able to navigate and make the pathway as efficient as possible to get more technologies through that regulatory burden. So the way I approach building strong relationships with clients, and especially building a strong working relationship with clients, because really it's a partnership where we work together, is by emphasizing effective communication, mutual accountability, and trust, which ultimately that just takes time. In terms of communication, I think it's important to individualize communication to each client, because each client will have different priorities, technical expertises that they come in, and limitations on resources. Effective communication leads to clear expectations that we can hold each other accountable for. And remember, this is a two-way street where I'm not going to be an expert on everything that the client comes in with. And so there's got to be that mutual accountability and deliverables. And finally, as each big milestone is reached, as the project progresses along, that trust is built, which leads to successful outcomes and hopefully a long-term successful partnership where we can look back at the big mission that was accomplished, which is getting the medical device to market. One quality that I think sets Rook Quality Systems apart from other consulting firms on the market is that Rook has built an impressive set of consultants who are triple threats when they work with our clients, in that they're able to implement a quality management system, project manage, and navigate the pathway to market in terms of the regulatory pathway. So they're adept at the US FDA CFR, ISO 13485, and other international regulations as well. These consultants are able to wear those many hats for our clients, and I think that makes them really valuable assets in getting their devices to market. And that makes RQS just an incredibly valuable partner when our clients choose us. I know it's cliche, but teamwork makes the dream work. So as consultants, I see so many different products, but I'll never have the level of expertise that clients who come in who have developed their products from the ground up will have. Being able to move together as one team and answer the questions about the product that are naturally going to arise as we explore the regulatory path that I've translated is key to navigating that regulatory pathway as efficiently and as effectively as possible. The way I balance client needs with regulatory requirements to ensure both clients and innovation is I like to address the common misconception that statutory requirements from regulators like the FDA are intrinsically a hindrance to innovation. While that sometimes obviously can be true, it's important to remember that FDA has the responsibility to protect patients from the impacts of potentially harmful treatments or where treatments just present more risks than benefits. I believe that getting clients to understand the partnership that we're establishing with FDA when we submit regulatory requests for novel technologies involves presenting these novel technologies in a truthful and accurate manner to convey the risks and benefits, and that ultimately the regulatory hurdles are a means to demonstrate through data that these novel technologies will benefit the patients while minimizing risks. I believe with that paradigm shift that we can get both optimal compliance and protecting patient safety and innovation, and that we'll get the most advanced medical device technologies to market through the FDA. What motivates me to excel in my role as a regulatory affairs professional, ultimately working in the healthcare industry, is understanding that my talents and energy are being used to impact patient outcomes. I've been passionate about healthcare since I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, by the time I turned 15, all three of my mom's sisters, my aunts, died of preventable diseases, and that really sparked a big push in my heart to try to get into the healthcare industry. So improving patient health and extending life is something that I just naturally think about all the time. And working in medical devices, I've been able to see that the variety of technologies, from the most mundane and basic to the most advanced, make significant differences in patients' lives. So even personally, being able to check an Apple Watch and see your step count or see how many calories you've burned motivates you to exercise or sleep more, all the way to, I recently had 2 kids who are under the age of 2, but being in the delivery room for the first time as a young dad, seeing the use of a dynamometer and seeing the uterine contractions and how that helped give birth, and seeing the latest developments in ultrasound technology has really shaped how I see my own role, and that really motivates me to excel, because I believe as we advance those technologies, we are going to be able to ultimately increase people's dedication to their own health and increase the impact the interventional technologies have when people need medical devices to save their lives. Rook's core values are really great. I think the first core value, the mission statement, resonates with me the most deeply, and that's having an upbeat attitude and focusing on great teamwork. That's because naturally, working as a regulatory affairs professional, the topic and the tasks that are before us as a team can be quite contentious. There's many different ways to interpret regulations. There's many different approaches. But I think that having a positive, collaborative attitude is the most effective way to decipher the most effective strategy and move together as unexpected challenges come up as you interact with the agency and course correct. The way I like to spend my free time outside of work is I have 2 young children who are under the age of 2, so right now I'm not spending much free time other than parenting, which has been a joy, but obviously not what I used to do. I'm in Colorado, so I grew up in the outdoors. I love camping, running, hiking, rock climbing, mountain biking, and I hope in a couple of years, as my kids get older, I can get them into the outdoors like I grew up, and that'll be my plan. During my career, the biggest change I've seen in the medical device industry has been that FDA has begun to emphasize a real partnership with industry to really accomplish 2 goals. One of those is to make sure that the most advanced healthcare technologies reach patients in the US so that the US populace has access, and also to ensure that manufacturers ultimately continue to do business within the US, because obviously many of them are based here. This partnership has been reflected specifically in many of my meetings with the FDA over the last years. Although FDA remains a strict guard to protect US patients from devices that pose risks, and they have their statutes to ensure that that happens, they have become easier to communicate with and easier to work with. For example, they've released a significant amount of guidance in just the last few years for many evolving technologies, such as artificial intelligence, that have helped shape how industry should approach releasing these novel technologies into the medical devices that they manufacture. I think that the biggest regulatory and quality trend that will have the biggest impact over the next 5 years is undoubtedly AI. And that doesn't just mean in the implementation of AI and machine learning within medical device technologies that patients use. I saw a press release from FDA just the other day that they are beginning to use AI to scan the web for misleading and false advertising from within the drug industry. And inevitably that's going to bleed over into the medical device industry, where FDA is going to begin using new tools to streamline their operations and be able to scan the entire internet for false and misleading claims. So I think that'll be a big change in many different ways. If I could solve one challenge within the medical device industry overnight, it would be the collection of clinical data. The collection of clinical data for novel medical technologies runs a risk-based approach where there are different classifications to get started in collecting real-world clinical data based on the level of risk that the device poses. However, I still think the burden, especially financially, for devices that are low risk can be quite substantial and quite burdensome. I think that oftentimes we kind of run a reverse paradigm where as devices become more adopted through other, general intended uses, we see lots of academic studies showing that real world effect. But I believe if we could just kind of reverse that, figure out which devices have that potential to make real world impact earlier, we would see the cream rise to the top and get the best medical devices through to the market access as fast on the earlier stage, making the patient impact more significant. So the way I see my role and Rook's role evolving in the industry in the future of medtech is that I think that Rook will quickly become a regulatory leader and trusted advisor for medtech innovators. Right now, I think there's a huge opportunity to guide novel medical device manufacturers through the regulatory pathway in a means that's effective and efficient. Rook's already built a reputation for being able to implement quality systems that are compliant for domestic and international submissions, while also guiding through the regulatory path if needed. But I know that the regulatory strategy piece can always be a burden for manufacturers, especially for novel technologies. And I hope to see that Rook becomes a partner for those types of clients in the future.